So excited to see so many people tuning in tonight. It's really wonderful to have seen the feedback and interest in today's part two presentation. I'm going to be your host for tonight. My name is Monica Seidel. I'm the Communications and Fundraising Manager at Watersheds Canada. And Kirsten, I'll get the next slide. This one, if people weren't around, we had a first part to this series in the fall. And there's going to be a link in the chat to that first one if you didn't have a chance to watch it or you didn't know it existed. And so that was really introductory to the topic of salt pollution. And today we're going to be doing a deeper dive to the alternatives of road and sidewalk salts. We have invited a number of guest speakers from a broad spectrum of sectors, and each will have the opportunity to speak about their current work and research related to road salt alternatives. We'll then move into the structured paneled questions as well as an open audience Q&A. And then we'll round out the evening by providing concrete actions you can take to get involved and support our fresh water. So as the presentations are going, please feel free to put your Q&A in the chat so that when we get to that part of today's presentation, we'll be ready to go with all of those. Next slide. To start, I want to share a personal land and water acknowledgement and gratitude statement. So I am a settler who grew up on and now works and lives on the traditional ancestral territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe, which is home to beautiful watery places like what you can see on the screen. So this was last summer on Kitchi, which is also known as the Ottawa River. As someone who is very fortunate to live in this area, I seek every day to honor the land I am on and the water that I am dependent on. And I'm grateful to the many caretakers who ensured that I could do this today. As I continually listen to, read about, and learn from Indigenous leaders and nature as a teacher, with permission, I include their guiding principles and stories into the programs that I deliver and the education materials I create at Watersheds Canada. I strive to work in relation to and learn from others as we all join together to care for our nature. Next slide. Today is a undertaking of three amazing freshwater organizations, including Water Watchers, Water Rangers, and Watersheds Canada. We'll be sharing resources throughout today's presentation, and I just want to assure people that you are going to get, again, a recording of today's session, but also a summary handout at the end, which will summarize key points as well as resources and next steps. So if you find yourself just really engrossed in the conversation in the panel and you forget to jot something down, you will be getting everything directly to your inbox. Also want to take a moment to thank the funders that made today's event possible, including Freshwater Future, the Canada Water Agency, and the Hodgson Family Foundation. To start us off, there's going to be a poll that's launching up on your screen and has two quick questions for you. We're just trying to get an idea of who is in the audience with us and what we already might know about salt pollution. So if you can answer those two questions, that would be a really great grounding exercise for all of us in the room, and then we'll share the results at the end. The first question is, how knowledgeable do you feel about alternatives to road salt? And you have a couple of options. And then the second question is, how confident do you feel we can work together to address salt pollution? So again, these are really quick, anonymous, just gives us an idea of who is in the room. We're looking pretty good at participation already. 70% of you have answered the questions. So I'll just give you maybe a minute or two if you would like to answer that poll, and then we'll share the results. Give 10 more seconds to answer those. Okay, I'm going to end the poll, which should allow you to now see we have a pretty good spread of people who are feeling confident that we can work together. Everyone's feeling at least north of somewhat confident, which is great. And ideally by the end of today's session, that will even more increase. And it's looking like most people here in the room don't feel very knowledgeable or only somewhat knowledgeable in terms of alternatives. So that is probably why you're all here, to be able to increase that knowledge. And we know that with the panelists that are going to be here tonight, that that will happen for everyone. So thank you everyone for answering those. We're now going to pass things over to Jerome Marty, who's going to give us an introduction on the salt pollution problem in the Great Lakes. Jerome is, sorry, the poll's doing funny things on my end. Jerome is a limnologist and the executive director of the International Association for Great Lakes Research. With a background in plankton ecology and environmental research, he has contributed to advancing science-based policies for the protection and restoration of freshwaters. In his role at the International Association for Great Lakes Research, Jerome has worked to strengthen connections among researchers, policymakers, and practitioners, fostering collaboration and knowledge exchange across the Great Lakes community. Welcome, Jerome.
Thank you very much, Monica. A pleasure to be with everyone tonight, joining you from Washington, D.C. Not that I particularly like being in the States these days, but it is Great Lakes Day tomorrow, and we have a lot of discussions that needs to be done, even with our American colleagues. Next slide, please. We did already something that I feel is really important to start conversations in a good way, that is to acknowledge the place where we are. I'm not going to repeat what Monica has said, but I want to add that this is also an opportunity for us to reflect and acknowledge the harm and mistakes of the past, and to consider how we are and can each in our own way try to move forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaborations. And as a person who did spent a lot of years at school in academia, I think there is a lot to think about here for those in academia. So I really wanted to insist on this. Next slide. Thank you for the intro, Monica. I am a limnologist, and I want to say I'm not a salt expert. I studied zooplankton for a number of years, worked in the policy sphere next with the government of Canada. And then in 2022, I had that beautiful opportunity to join IAGLR, the Great Lakes Research Association, as their new ED executive director. And sometimes when I have time between meetings and Zoom calls, I play accordion, but not tonight. Next slide. Just a few words about IAGLR, the association. We are a non-for-profit organization, like the other co-host for this event. We are a scientific society made of about 800 members from about 15 different countries. It is about the Great Lakes, the Laurentian Great Lakes, but not only those, it's about the large lakes of the world, including the African Great Lakes. We exist, we were created in 1967, and we are dedicated to promoting sciences, with an S, on the large lakes of the world. Next slide. We are known for a couple of programs, things. We have a journal, the Journal of Great Lakes Research, which is an academic publication that is quite known on large lakes of the world. This is the latest cover. We have a more public-facing publications called Lakes Letter, and we just released one on the other lakes outside of the Laurentian Great Lakes that you can access publicly on our website. And we're also known for our conference, the Great Lakes, the annual Great Lakes Conference, which this year will happen in Winnipeg next May, jointly with the Society of Canadian Aquatic Sciences. So a lot of aquatic scientists from all over Canada, from US and from other countries will join in Winnipeg. Next. And other priorities that I just wanted to mention about IAGLR, we want to promote all sciences, and I think over the last 3, 4, 5 years, we've seen really an increase in the social sciences. We've seen also a lot of participations from First Nations and tribes in the things we do, and we are really happy about that we've been able to create a space for all these different voices to be heard. We provide more and more advices to governments. We get these requests now more regularly, And we are also asked not only to be a voice for the science, but also for the scientists. And this is in particular over the last year with the changes in the US administrations, where a lot of scientists took a significant hit due to the new administration in the US. Next slide. Okay, now the interesting part. A couple of weeks ago, there was a report that was published by the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, and the Canada Water Agency to release the updates on how are the Great Lakes doing. And this is the State of the Great Lakes 2025 reports. You have a QR code here to access the report. And I'm just going to give you a little snapshot about the main results here and how to connect with SALT here, which is of interest for all of you. So we're going to dive into a little bit how we create, how this type of report is created, and how it relates to SALT issues. Next. So two parties are involved in this report, and it is published every 2 years. And to create the health reports for each of the lakes, we were using indicators. There's a series of indicators that are analyzed, and these indicators relates to the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreements that has a number of annexes. So each annexes gets an indicator in that report. Next. This is just a quick view on how things are done. There are a total of 42 sub-indicators. They are divided in 9 families of indicators. One is about drinking water, one is about swimming, one is about the fisheries, chemicals, etc., etc. And then they are calculated for each of the 5 Great Lakes, and then it provides an image, an overview results for the entire Great Lakes basin. And for those, we have a rating that varies from good to poor, and sometimes undetermined. Still, there are some of these variables that we cannot determine very well for the Great Lakes. Next slide. So these are the 9 indicators, and I'm not going to go in details for all of them because I have 10 minutes, but I selected 3 that I feel are really interesting in relation to the salinization of the Great Lakes. And I'm going to highlight these 3 here. I'm going to talk rapidly about the toxic chemicals indicator, the invasive species indicator, and the watershed impacts and changes in physical conditions indicator. Next. But before I do so, I want to say that the discussions we are having is not a new one. And I was, in preparing for this presentation, I reread some publications from Jack Valentine, Johnny Biosphere, as he was calling himself at the end of his career, carrying a globe on his back and biking to schools. Johnny Biosphere, Jack Valentine was a prominent researcher working on the Great Lakes, worked a lot on eutrophication, but he also worked on salt. And there are 2 publications, one the 1978 and 1979 IJC reports that he contributed significantly to that are really good readings. And I'm happy to share those PDFs to anyone that wants to have them. And realizing that we are talking about something that existed already in the 1970s, and even before. And the questions maybe have not changed so much. We already were warning people about the effect of salt already in 1970s. Next. Okay, toxic chemicals. Let's take a look at the rating for that indicator. And I'm going to ask for the next slide. This is these are the sub-indicators to answer the questions: how levels of toxic chemicals declined, and salt is part of these potential emerging contaminants. It's not really recognized as one in the water quality agreements. Overall, we see that the status is fair throughout the Great Lakes and changing to improving depending on where we are. And you can see here that they are five different categories of toxic chemicals being in the sediments, in the water, in fish. Birds are going a lot better. I think it's the results of some of the legacy contaminants that have disappeared. But you can see that for the toxic chemicals in water, this is where we would find the salt. Things are not necessarily going very good. 3 out of 5 lakes are fair or improving, and one is still undetermined, which is, in my opinion, a big problem. Lake Michigan, we don't know the states for toxic chemicals in water for Lake Michigan. Next slide. In relations to the salinizations, we know that the content of salt has increased over time. These are studies, there was a review done by Chapra et al. In 2009, since the 1800 up to now. And all to say that when we look at the Great Lakes, we think about the water quality agreements. There are no criteria for salt in that document. We only have the guidelines that exist. There are 2 levels. The 2 levels are for long-term exposure to chloride at 120 milligram per liter, and the short-term or acute exposure at 640 milligram per liter. But these are guidelines, which means that they are attached to best management practices, therefore not reinforced. Next slide. And we do know that there are problems, and we're going to hear that with other presenters tonight. I'm just showing here data for Lake Simcoe. Lake Simcoe is not a Great Lake, but it is certainly a large lake in the Great Lakes Basin. We know that the concentrations in chlorides are increasing in that lake, and in fact, we are seeing spikes of concentrations in Lake Simcoe. There was in February 2025 a concentration so over 26,000 milligrams of chloride in Lake Simcoe. This is above the level of the oceans, that is close to 19,000 milligrams per liter. Next slide. Okay, the second indicator I wanted to touch on is invasive species. Next. And what we see is that the indicator is separate in 2. We have one part that looks at the prevention. Do we have new species that have arrived in the Great Lakes Basin? And things are rather good, which indicates that the policies in place are effective to reduce the arrival of new invaders. But the impact is poor and is not improving over time. And this is true throughout all of the 5 Great Lakes. We are seeing significant impact of invasive species on the way these lakes function. Next slide. And why did I select invasive species? Well, it's because if we look at the family of invaders that we have in the Great Lakes, almost 200 of them, the majority of them came from an area that is quite salty, the Caspian Sea, which means that these individuals, the invaders that we have in the Great Lakes, are really good at adapting to salty environments. They actually came from much saltier environment than the Great Lakes. So the current invaders are likely going to do very well in a more salty environment than today. And if there are new invaders, we know that policies work, but if there are new invaders and if they were to come from the Caspian Sea, as they came in the past, they would likely be able to survive as the environment become more salty. 2 pictures here from the media, the top one on the Toronto Star and the second one on the CBC website. We did find 2 invasive crab species in the Mimico Creek. This is in the GTA area, and that was in 2012. And in 2015, in Hamilton Bay, the Chinese midden crabs were found. These are species that are not found in freshwater normally, and they were found in creeks where the level of salt allowed for their survivors. They were not able to reproduce, but it was outstanding that we could find living crabs in freshwater in the Great Lakes. Next slide. The last is the watershed impacts and changes in physical conditions. Next. And this is where we have a number of indicators that are supporting this category. The question is, are land use changes and other stressors impacting the lakes? The answer is yes. For some of the lakes, lake area is very impacted. Land cover is changing rapidly. We have a lot of agricultural development. We have changes in the shoreline. And for all of the Great Lakes, we have an increase in human population. And I suspect that if we were to do correlations between human populations and salt use, we would find a positive relationship. So this is, I think, an indicator that also has a strong link to the amount of salt in the environment. Next slide. Three other sub-indicators in that bigger indicator are about the physical conditions of the environment, the amount of precipitations, the water levels, and the ice cover. And we know for the ice cover that it is been declining for the last decades. Now we have a much longer ice-free period. We have less ice, and we are saying that this is mostly due to climate change, but it is very much possible now we also have an effect of salinizations that reduces the ability of the Great Lakes to freeze. Next slide. This is the ice cover from yesterday in all of the Great Lakes as an average. You can see that we're doing pretty well compared to the mean average. 53 years of data here. This is the red line. The black line is us now. But if we were to look at this trend over time, there is definitely a decline. This year we did have a winter, last year too, but the 2 years prior to that, we had the record low ice cover in the Great Lakes. So I would argue that lake salinizations amplifies the effect of climate change. Next slide. And one aspect that worries limnologists is the effect of salt on the thermal regime of lakes. Lakes stratifies during the summer, they turn over in the fall, they turn over in the spring, and these are really important events in the cycle of a lake because the oxygen, nutrients get all remixed together during these two turnout periods. And what has been reported here is that when we get more salt, we create a more dense layer of water and we reduce the ability of the lakes to turn over completely. And if we don't turn over completely, it means that the bottom may become anoxic much faster. Does it matter? Yes, enormously for the functioning of the lakes. That's a major change, a major risk. And there have been publications from UFT. Matthew Well is a physical limnologist that shows that Lake Ontario's stratification is changing, and it is possible that we could lose the thermal regime that we have currently in Lake Ontario. So I'm raising concerns here that salinizations will have important impact on the physical features of the lakes. Next slide. Just 2 slides to wrap up. What did Johnny Valentine said in 1978? And he was facing with the same situations. We had an objectives for chlorides or TDS at the time in the water quality agreements. And he was making the point that the issue that we are facing is that we have created a way to manage water quality and environmental issues without considering that the man is in the system. And he was saying that we should calculate what is the cost of salinizations. How many cars are being rusting every year? How many pairs of shoes are being destroyed by salt? And of course, it goes much beyond that with all the infrastructure that is impacted. So he was making the point that we should have an ecosystem approach that includes the man in the calculations that will then help to identify where we should act rapidly. Next slide. There is a period open for comments for the reports that I mentioned. The QR code here will bring you to this page. This is sharing your perspective through the IJC website. I want to thank the IJC for providing that slide, as well as EPA for providing some of the slides about the indicators that I used in my presentation. Next slide. And I want to thank you for your attention. You can follow us on social media and consider sharing your findings in Lakes Letter in Journal of Great Lakes Research if you do have scientific material. And I thank you again. And with this, I will pass back to Monica from Watershed Canada.
Amazing. Thank you, Jerome, for the overview and really setting the stage of the freshwater health in the Great Lakes. We're going to now move into an introduction from Dandy Lindemood, and she's going to be talking about how there is scientific and civic consensus that winter salt use on our roads and sidewalks is a major issue for our freshwater environments, but there is conflicting information about the alternatives. So what do we mean by alternatives, and which ones are actually viable options to reduce salt use? So I'm going to introduce Danny now. She is the Campaigns and Communications Director of Water Watchers and is also the lead organizer of the Ontario Salt Pollution Coalition, a working group of individuals and organizations seeking provincial action to address the salt pollution of Ontario waters. Danny is a community activator, campaigner, and creative based in the Great Lakes Basin, with a master's exploring water sustainability and access, as well as a decade of academic, non-governmental organization, and creative experience researching and protecting water. Danny is honored that water is the connective thread of her career. So welcome, Danny.
Thanks so much for the introduction, Monica. And I just want to start by saying hello to so many familiar faces in the audience today. It was such a joy to get to see so many people that I've been connected to through my water protection work rolling in through the attendance list here. So lovely to see you all. Hello. Thanks for being here tonight. And thank you to all the new faces joining us to dive deeper and learn about this issue. I want to start by providing just a little bit of context on what salt is, why the alternatives are needed, and offer a couple different frameworks to think about and evaluate alternatives to salt. So in front of you, you see the chemical makeup of salt. It is sodium chloride, and that is made up of two elements that combine to make this crystalline structure, which we know as road salt. Slide, please. Thanks. Just to go over a couple of the properties of road salt, it is an extremely effective de-icer. It actually lowers the freezing point of water, which is actually how it melts the ice when road salt is applied. And it's harvested from all over the world, included locally, but also in many places throughout South and Central Asia. And the other kind of side of salt, though, is that it is highly corrosive. It is so unimaginable, the level of corrosiveness that it actually has. And it is additionally a designated toxic chemical. It has been designated as a toxic chemical since 1999 in Canada. So I think it's really important to remember that as we're talking about this substance that's really woven into the fabric of our lives nowadays, that it is in fact a toxic chemical that is federally designated. And we see the reason why, I think, really clearly when we think about the impacts, which I have a couple pictures of on the next couple slides. In our first webinar, we go deep on the water impacts of road salt pollution, but I'm going to take us to a slightly different place, which is the real world impacts on infrastructure. So this is a picture from Calgary from the water main break that they had recently. And that huge impact to their drinking water infrastructure was driven by the corrosiveness of salt. Salt collapsed the roadways and ate its way through the actual like water pipeline infrastructure, that the distribution network. Next slide. There's also this corrosive factor of how it impacts the lifetime of infrastructure, like bridges. This is the Champagne Bridge in Montreal, and it is has been reduced from what it was expected to be in its lifetime of use, about 150 years or so, to just 50 years because of the corrosiveness of salt. And I have one more example on the next slide, which is from Toronto. The Gardiner Expressway was discovered to have these huge chunks of concrete being eaten away from the underside of the highway and actually compromising the structural integrity of that infrastructure. So I don't have to spell it out for you that this is big money impacts, but it's also drinking water security impacts. So beyond all the ways that we'll hear today about how salt really does impact our aquatic ecosystems, there are these other externalities that we can't discount, and that's because salt is so corrosive. Next slide. This is a framework that I'd like to offer you that really puts water at the center of evaluating road salt alternatives. And it's just a couple quick questions that we can use to think critically about alternatives to salt as they're proposed. We have seen the case for why we need alternatives, but we don't want a problem shift. So how can we make sure that we don't do that? A first question is something being added to the environment? Is there potentially a harmful effect to the water quality or to aquatic species that might be happening from adding this alternative onto the land or into the water? And then can it be recovered? Like, is it something that will dissolve, or is it something that could be collected? And can it be remediated? Is it something that can be removed from the environment once it's entered it? The thing that I want to highlight here is that salt is an offender on all of these fronts. There's something being added to the environment, sodium chloride. It is harmful to water quality. It's literally turning freshwater saline and impacting the ability of aquatic species to live in those ecosystems. It can't be recovered because it dissolves into the water itself. And it's incredibly difficult to remediate and extraordinarily expensive as well. So on all those fronts, salt is a perfect example of something that we don't want to be adding to our aquatic systems. Next slide. And this is just a fun little acronym to help you remember this framework. HAR, like hardy har har. Take a laugh. Salt pollution isn't a laughing matter, but it can help us remember a way to evaluate these alternatives. Is it harmful? Is something being added? Can it be recovered? Can it be remediated? Next slide. And this is the second framework that I'll offer for tonight, which is a way to conceptualize the different categories of alternatives. There are chemical, physical, practical, and policy alternatives. Just to flag, the practical and the policy are like a little bit interwoven with one another, but they're discrete enough that I'm going to present them separately tonight. So let's dive into the chemical alternatives first. Next slide. So the definition of a chemical alternative is a chemical substance that's being added to the environment to melt the snow and ice. Some examples of that are calcium magnesium acetate, which itself is a salt product. Beet juice, we often think about that as like an organic kind of additive, but really beet juice is just another kind of chemical that we're using to melt the snow and ice. And calcium chloride. That one has chloride in the name, and you'll see a lot of alternatives in this chemical arena that have chloride in the name, and it essentially is saying that there's salt and something else in these products. There are benefits to chemical alternatives. They have lower temperature effectiveness. They can be part of a circular economy, like recovering brine from an operation that makes cheese or pickles. And then they are much less corrosive on the whole than sodium chloride. But there are like really important drawbacks to chemical alternatives that include that they dissolve completely, so they are really hard to remediate. They are expensive to produce, and there is no known chemical alternative that is environmentally friendly. And I just want to put that out there because there's so much greenwashing that happens with these chemical alternatives, saying that they're eco-friendly, and the science doesn't say that, and we'll get to hear a little bit more about that tonight. Next, we'll dive into the physical alternatives. Physical alternatives are a physical substance that is a traction agent that is added to the environment to decrease slip and increase traction on snow and ice. Examples of this are sand and gravel, wood chips, and non-clumping kitty litter also falls into this category. The benefits of a physical alternative is that it's not dependent on the temperature. These kind of materials are often available locally and can be sourced as part of a circular economy. And they're recoverable. Places like Calgary report 70 to 80% recovery rates of the sand and gravel that they use in their jurisdictions during the winter. So there's some sustainability potentially built into that. The drawbacks are that they can disrupt aquatic ecosystems by impacting the habitat, adding sediment essentially into riverbeds. It impacts the ability of fish often to reproduce, which I think we'll also get to hear a little bit about tonight. Um, these kinds of products are often extracted themselves from the environment. So gravel mining, sand mining, forestry to create like the wood chips. These are not without impact. So the ability to recover these products is really, really important. And it also causes windshield damage on the roads where things like sand and gravel are used often. There's a joke about people living in Alberta because they don't use a lot of salt there, have to get a new windshield every winter because they will get a windshield chip from the gravel at some point driving on the highways. So that's a brief overview of the physical alternatives, and we can now move into the practical. Practical alternatives are practices or innovations that remove snow and ice from the environment without additives. Examples of this are like more shoveling, more plowing, specialized equipment. There's ice chipper scrapers that don't require anything added to the environment to use those. There's also using kind of like specialized adaptations to our plows, like rubber blades, for instance, have been shown to be much more effective at snow removal. So that's another example of like a practical alternative that has a real measurable outcome for snow and ice removal. And there's other like very cool innovations out there. I'm just going to mention one, which is there's UV absorbing concrete in development, which essentially is like self-maintained. It uses the UV to create passive heat in the concrete so that ice can't form and stick to it anyways. So very cool things kind of in that innovation realm in this practical front. The benefits are, again, it's not temperature dependent. And the big benefit is that it's not adding anything to the environment. It's also scalable. These approaches can be used almost anywhere, and it creates employment, which I think is a really interesting thing to think about when we're thinking about how do we create a more sustainable society together. The drawbacks are that it is more time intensive and that they can have costs associated with implementing these kinds of solutions. But this is the area that I want you to like star in your mind because it is incredibly important that we invest more in these practical non-additive alternatives. And last but not least, we also have policy alternatives. This is a subset, I think, in a lot of ways of practical alternatives, but it's about how we enshrine those practical alternatives into policy. So, legislation, requirements, standards, laws, and they really enhance safety. So, examples of this are lower winter speed limits, requiring snow tires, and limited liability for contractors. Right now, contractors know that they're putting down too much salt, but they don't have any standards that they can point to in the province of Ontario to show that that they've done their snow removal job. So it leaves them open to all these frivolous lawsuits. So many jurisdictions across the U.S. have implemented a policy regime called limited liability, where the contractors get certified and then they follow the standardized practices and therefore can have a lowered level of liability exposure. The benefits to these kind of policy alternatives are that they're also not temperature dependent, that they're universally applicable, and that they add safety while reducing additives to the environment. So there's some really positive outcomes. The drawbacks, it does require some oversight, some regulation and compliance monitoring. And of course, that does mean that there can be costs associated with these things too. But there's costs associated with all of the alternatives. So it's just understanding how the economics pan out in the long run. That is the kind of formal conclusion of the main ways to think about these alternatives to salt. But I do want to close just on a note to say that consciousness shifting is something that we should consider as well. There's room to evolve our relationship with the winter season. We colloquially call the snow and ice removal activities that are poisoning our lands and waters winter control. And it's a reflection of our relationship in modernity with this season. And it means that we try to disappear the signs of winter from our roads and sidewalks, but we live in places that have winter, and we don't have to have that relationship with winter. We can work with the season, embrace the pace that it invites, and learn to listen from the wisdom that nature is offering during this time of year as well. So that provides a basis to think critically about salt alternatives. But now we get to hear from the people on the front lines of salt alternative research and practices. So I'll pass it back to Monica to introduce our next speakers.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Danny, for helping frame all of those alternatives in a really easy to follow format with all of those tables. I'm going to introduce all of our panelists at once, so stick with me with these introductions just so you know why we were able to invite these different speakers tonight. First, we have Dr. Shelley Arnett. Shelley is an aquatic ecologist at Queen's University whose research spans from fundamental to applied outcomes. She uses field and laboratory experiments as well as lake surveys and analyses of long-term data to assess plankton responses to human-induced environmental change, with a major focus on understanding multiple stressor interactions. She collaborates extensively with scientists from government, academic, and non-governmental organizations, and recently led 2 global initiatives to examine variation in the impact of freshwater salinization on zooplankton. Next, we welcome Jennifer Adams. Jennifer is an environmental scientist with nearly 20 years of experience in freshwater and aquatic sciences. Jennifer currently works as scientific advisor at the Bruce Peninsula Biosphere Association. She holds a PhD in physical geography from University College London in the United Kingdom and has worked across academia, government, and nonprofit sectors. Jennifer has expertise in aquatic ecology, hydrology, environmental chemistry, and environmental monitoring. Her work focuses on synthesizing complex environmental data to support evidence-based decision-making and collaborative water stewardship. We are also fortunate to have Alicia Breckenridge joining our panel. Alicia is a Huntsville-based teacher with a master's in environmental studies from York University. Alicia works for the Friends of the Salty Muskoka Watershed and is the project lead for one of their programs, which is called the Salty Muskoka Community Action Project. Salty Muskoka is a community awareness campaign focusing on raising awareness of road salt pollution in Muskoka and providing community members with tips, tools, and strategies to reduce road salt use to protect the health of the Muskoka watershed. Finally, Jerome Marty will rejoin us for the panel, bringing his expertise to the discussion as well. So before we get into the panel questions, we're going to give each of the panelists a few minutes to introduce their work. So we will start with Dr. Arnott.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm going to talk about some of the research that we've been doing in my lab, looking at alternatives. And the alternatives that we've been studying are the chemical ones that Danny has been telling us about. So next slide, please. So just a quick overview. Our organisms currently at risk in Ontario, and this is just a map showing chloride concentrations in across Ontario. And the main thing I want to highlight is the red is in areas near like urban areas, and the chloride concentrations tend to be higher there. But throughout kind of south central Ontario, a lot of the water bodies have concentrations between 5 and 40. And some of our research has suggested that within that range, they're probably susceptible. And the organisms that we've been working on in my lab are the zooplankton that are shown in this simplified food web. They're the organisms that are grazing on the algae and then in turn eaten by higher trophic levels like fish. So next slide, please. And again, just quickly showing you some results of studies from our lab. This was a study we did looking at Daphnia, so a type of zooplankton. We did some laboratory toxicity tests, and the bottom line from these results is that even at low chloride concentrations, we were seeing a reduction in their reproduction and an increase in their mortality. And so the graph on the left just shows the number of offspring that they have. And so by the time we reached the water quality guideline, we were seeing a 64% reduction on average. And in terms of mortality, this graph on the right is showing the chloride concentration where we see a 50% mortality after 21 days. And you can see that with all of the taxa there, more than half of them are dying well below the water quality guidelines. So next slide. And then we collaborated with a number of scientists from around the world, and we did a coordinated study where we looked at the chloride concentration that would cause a 50% reduction in the zooplankton grazers. And the points in the red indicate sites where the zooplankton weren't protected by the water quality guidelines, and the black are ones that were. And so you can see there's variation, but for the most part, the current water quality guidelines that we have aren't protecting organisms in all lakes. And so that leads to why we were interested in the alternatives. So the next slide, please. And so as Danny was mentioning, there's a lot of different chemical alternatives. And so we were interested in looking at things like the beet juice brine and some of these inorganic additives. So next slide, please. And so the first study I'm going to show you about, we looked at beet juice brine, and we did short-term lab experiments. And so we exposed Daphnia to different concentrations of beet juice brine. Because the beets have high concentrations of potassium, we also had a comparison where we looked at how toxic potassium chloride was, and then we compared it against sodium chloride. So next slide, please. And so the results of this are shown here. And what these graphs are showing is the proportion of the individuals, so the Daphnia, that were alive after 48 hours versus the concentration of chloride that they were exposed to. And so I'm going to actually start at the bottom figure, which is showing sodium chloride. And what this graph shows is that half of the Daphnia in the experiment died after 48 hours when the concentration of chloride was just around 1,800 milligrams of chloride per liter. The middle graph shows the potassium chloride, and so it was more toxic. And so half of them died at a concentration of about 250 milligrams of chloride per liter. And what was really shocking to us was when we exposed them to the beet juice brine, which is a combination of sodium chloride and beet juice, which is what they would be putting on the roads. We found that it only took 83 milligrams of chloride to kill half of the Daphnia in 48 hours. And so what this suggested to us is that the beet juice brine is really toxic, more toxic than we imagined, and more toxic than its constituent components, the potassium and the sodium chloride. And one of the reasons for this might be because it's an organic compound, it gets broken down by bacteria, which consume oxygen. So we also saw a reduction in oxygen, and that's shown in the blue line. Okay, oh, yep, that's okay. Next slide. And so in addition to looking in the lab, we always like to scale up and look at kind of a more realistic environment. So we did these mesocosm studies that were very similar. We looked at beet juice brine and compared it to sodium chloride. And then we also compared that to another de-icer, master melt, which is a combination of sodium chloride, calcium chloride, and magnesium chloride. So next slide, please. And so what this graph is showing is the toxicity of beet juice brine and master melt compared to sodium chloride for all the species that were found in our mesocosm study. And so if the points are to the left of the line down the middle, it means that they're more toxic than sodium chloride. And if they're to the right, it means it's less toxic. And so the beet juice brine is represented by the pink triangles. And you can see that most of the species, for most of the species, the pink triangles are on the left. So they're more toxic than road salt. And interestingly, master melt actually was very similar to road salt in its toxicity. Okay, next slide. And so we also have been looking at other types of chemical de-icers. And so one common one that's used is Thorox, and it's a combination of sodium chloride, magnesium chloride, and calcium sulfate, plus some unknown organic material. And so we wanted to test this product in two different locations. So Muskoka, saltwater lakes, and in the Kingston or the Queen's University Biological Station, which is more of a medium hard water lake. Okay, next slide, please. And so we set up these mesocosm experiments, and we had 10 different concentrations of just regular rock salts of the sodium chloride, 10 concentrations of Thorox, and then we added zooplankton and monitored them for 6 weeks. And we did this in Lindsay Lake at the Queen's University Field Station and Plastic Lake up in Muskoka. So next slide. And so what we found was that the toxicity, the relative toxicity of Thorox compared to sodium chloride depended on which lake we were in. So whether it was a soft water lake or a hard water lake. So in Lindsay Lake, where it's more of a medium hard water lake, so it's got high calcium, there actually wasn't a statistical difference between the toxicity of Thorox and road salt. Now, as the concentration increased, we saw a reduction in biomass. So, I mean, both are equally toxic. But what was interesting was in Plastic Lake, they're both toxic, of course, but the Thorox actually was more toxic. It reduced the biomass at much lower concentrations than the sodium chloride. So next slide, please. And so what I'm showing you here is the relative toxicity of Thorox compared to sodium chloride in the Muskokas for the different species that were in our experiment. And so again, if the blue dots are on the left, it means it's more toxic than sodium chloride, and on the right, it's less toxic. So for most species in Muskoka, the Thorox was more toxic than sodium chloride. Okay, next slide. And so just to wrap this up, what we found was that salt was more toxic than we thought. And, a lot of people are responding to this by using alternative de-icers. We've started to test their toxicity, especially relative to sodium chloride. And we found that beet juice brine, which is often touted as a good solution, is way more toxic than just regular rock salt. Master melt, it turned out, was about the same as road salt. And then thaw rocks, it depended on the location. So in Muskoka, it was more toxic, and in Southern Ontario, it was about the same. And so I think that there's lots of work that needs to be done. A lot of these alternatives are kind of touted as being an eco-friendly, and clearly they're not. And so I think there's more work for us to do to try to understand their toxicity relative to road salt. And so that's it for me. Thank you very much.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Shelley. We're now going to pass things over to Alicia. Oh, we're going to pass things over to Jennifer.
Hello. Okay, thank you for that. Thank you, Shelley. What a wonderful presentation. So, like Jerome, I am an limnologist. I've spent most of my years studying freshwater sciences and aquatic ecology. I received my doctorate in 2017 and completed 2 postdocs in academia between 2017 and 2023 at the University of Toronto and University of Waterloo. And now I'm going on nearly 3 years in the nonprofit sector. I'm working currently with the Bruce Peninsula Biosphere Association as science advisor and water quality program manager on the Saugeen Bruce Peninsula. The Biosphere Association is an environmental nonprofit charitable organization established in 2002, operating on the Saugeen Bruce Peninsula, working to address environmental issues and increase community capacity and engagement in conservation programming on the peninsula. And so today, I will be speaking with you a bit about local considerations in road salt usage on the unique Bruce Peninsula and current methods in winter road maintenance. Okay, slide, thanks. Okay, so the Bruce Peninsula is located in Bruce County. So the bottom picture shows a little close-up of that. It's comprised of 2 municipalities, the South Bruce Peninsula and the Northern Bruce Peninsula, and it's a priority watershed in the Lake Huron Basin. This is a remote environment with fairly low population density, particularly on the Northern Bruce Peninsula, but with high levels of seasonal residents. It's a highly agricultural landscape and is ecologically significant with one of Canada's highest concentrations of rare species, and characterized as one of the Great Lakes biodiversity hotspots, and is also part of the UNESCO Niagara Escarpment Biosphere Reserve. The Bruce Peninsula is characterized by karst topography, which increases its vulnerability to surface and groundwaters due to significantly increased interactions between the two reservoirs. Slide. So karst topography is formed in landscapes comprised of water-soluble bedrock. Ontario Geological Survey, the Niagara Escarpment areas of Grey and Bruce counties constitute one of the most regionally extensive and significant dolostone karst plains in North America. However, karst ecosystems or karst systems on the northern Bruce Peninsula are very poorly mapped, which is a critical component of protecting water quality. Landscape features of karst environments result in significant surface water groundwater connections and allow for increased infiltration of surface waters into the groundwater aquifer at increased speeds and without or with minimal natural filtration. This makes the Bruce Peninsula one of Ontario's most vulnerable aquifers. Water quality and quantity within karst groundwater are vulnerable to impacts from land use activities, including intensive agricultural activity, poorly maintained septic systems, and the application of road salts and other chemicals at the surface. So due to the karst topography on the peninsula, potentially contaminated groundwater also enters Lake Huron or other water bodies in unexpected locations. Therefore, protecting surface waters on the peninsula means a protected groundwater aquifer, means a protected drinking water supply for most of the residents, and protected Great Lakes integrity in this vulnerable landscape. Slide. So in the context of why we're all here, this means reducing potential sources of chloride pollution at the surface, with road salting obviously being significant. The Saugeen Gray Sawble Northern Bruce Peninsula Drinking Water Source Protection Committee actively manages road salt applications and the issue of chloride pollution on the Northern Bruce Peninsula to protect municipal drinking water and the groundwater aquifer. Risk management plans and best management practices for salt storage and application on municipal roads are disseminated to municipalities, with science-based policies being updated and implemented to address chloride accumulation and groundwater and surface water. And as of 2024, new risk management plans are required for chloride pollution and the threat from road salt usage on the peninsula. Winter road maintenance on the peninsula is undertaken at various levels of government, including municipal, county, and provincial. The municipality of Northern Bruce Peninsula uses a mixture of 4% rock salt with screened sand for winter road maintenance of high traffic paved roads. And for unpaved gravel roads, sand is applied. And for paved roads with hard packed snow, sand is applied for traction. The municipality of South Bruce Peninsula and Bruce County have similar policies in place for winter road maintenance, with sand salt mixtures being reserved for class 2 and class 3 roads, with a center bare surface condition strategy being employed during the winter. And sand is applied on all other roads if the roads are maintained during the winter months. But action taken on private property are also left up to the decision of the individual landowner. Slide, yeah, thanks. So given what we know of the vulnerabilities particular to the Bruce Peninsula and current practices and approaches to winter maintenance, potential areas for future work on the Northern Bruce Peninsula would be to confirm low chloride levels as assumed in surface waters and monitor interactions between the surface waters and groundwater aquifer with respect to chloride pollution. Enhance the mapping of karst systems to improve understanding of the extent of interactions between surface water flows and the groundwater aquifer, and engage with landowners and residents to promote best management practices on private property when it comes to winter maintenance and road salt alternatives, and develop KTT materials for landowners and residents to increase knowledge and awareness of the issues surrounding road salts, chloride pollution, and how they apply in a karst environment. Slide, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Adams, and apologies for getting the presentations mixed up there. We'll now pass it over to Alicia.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much, Shelley, and thank you, Jennifer. My name is Alicia Breckenridge, and I work for Friends of the Muskoka Watershed. We're a charity organization, and we're based in Muskoka. Our vision for our organization is for a healthy Muskoka watershed forever. I am the project lead for the Salty Muskoka Community Action Project, and funded in part by the Canada Water Agency. Next slide, please. And I just want to tell you a little bit more about Salty Muskoka. So what does this mean? So our community action project is really based as kind of like a collective action campaign. The idea is to raise awareness of the road salt pollution problem concerns that we have here locally for Muskoka watershed. This entitles, or this is what I'm doing. I'm kind of tackling what we consider roughly 20% of the source of unregulated the source of road salt that's unregulated, privately or commercial use of road salt applied to walkways, sidewalks, driveways, and parking lots. I have 7 key goals that I'm working on and reporting back to the Canada Water Agency to help kind of tackle the problem of road salt in Muskoka without compromising safety. The next slide, please. These are my 7 goals. So we've been working on developing programming for schools, engaging with lake associations, training and working with community volunteer scientists, creating what I'm calling a volunteer observation network. This is a group of volunteers that are taking pictures of excessive road salt use in our community, so that as we roll out our awareness on road salts and chloride pollution across Muskoka, we have this kind of I don't know, a folder of pictures of excessive road salt use, and over time, hopefully, it would be amazing to see that change. Um, we're launching, or we've launched back in November. We had a Road Salt Awareness Month. I called it Salty November. And we visited 77 local businesses, and we talked to them about the road salt pollution problem. And we talked to them about I gave them some tools and tips to reduce their use of road salt, and are continuing those conversations into the new year for sure. Um, we are enlisting stores that offer kind of what we're calling road salt alternatives, mostly practical or traction based, and just creating those conversations. We have two stores that are working with us that give us space to come in and talk about the road salt pollution problem, provide our tips, and give our tools out there. So that's been a great experience, and we're like to build more stores that we can build relationships with. We monitor key waterways in Muskoka, and we do this in two ways. We have scientists on our board, and we also work with our community volunteer scientists to monitor specific areas heading into key waterways in Muskoka. Another part of this, our last goal, but a big part I'm really chipping away at, is working with large property owners and winter maintenance specialists, promoting specific training, the Smart About Salt winter maintenance training and certification program, and also Landscape Ontario's Academy of Snow and Ice Control. Thanks. Next slide, please. Thank you. So why is road salt an issue for Muskoka? Why are we concerned? Why am I here? As we've already seen through science, road salt was declared toxic. So I have in my notes 2001, but I think it's 1999. But anyway, federal guidelines were set at 120 milligrams per liter. And me, myself, coming into this issue too, a little bit new, I couldn't picture what 120 milligrams per liter looks like. And going out to schools, I felt like I was kind of unprepared to explain that. So I actually, oh, next slide, please. Sorry, I was clicking away. This is a picture, a top-down picture of my scale at home. So this is 120 milligrams of coarse sea salt. So just for those of you that need a visual cue as to what 120 milligrams per liter looks like, that little kind of Mickey Mouse head kind of is my little bowl, and I put coarse sea salt in there. That's 120 milligrams, and then per liter. So you just have to think of like a liter water bottle. This is not quite a liter, but roughly. And that just gives you an idea of how much road salt we're talking about. So this is a Canadian guideline. And next slide, please. And but we kind of live in a unique area where we actually have soft waters here in Muskoka. So our Muskoka watershed is primarily soft water, low calcium, and Shelley was talking about that. So chloride is more toxic in soft water, and so again, what I did is oh, sorry, hang on a second. I wanted to say quickly, in working with Dr. Shelley Arnott at Queensland University and working with Dr. Norman Yen, he's our founder at Friends of Muskoka Watershed, it's been determined that 10 milligrams per liter of chloride is more appropriate guideline for the Muskoka watershed. So per liter, 10 milligrams it will help to protect the Daphnia, the zooplankton, the small critters in our ecosystems that Shelley was referring to. Next slide, please. So again, just for a visual, here's my scale. There's 2 pieces of coarse sea salt on my scale, and that represents the 10 milligrams per liter. So when I'm out, thank you. It's hard to meet guidelines like this when you see excessive road salt pictures coming in from around your community. It's hard to know the science, know the guidelines, know what would be best for our community, our ecosystems here, and then seeing pictures of excessive road salt around our community. So we currently know that 25% of recreational lakes tested by the District of Municipality of Muskoka, sorry, have chloride levels above 10 milligrams per liter already. We know that roughly 20% of the problem of road salt pollution in Muskoka comes from walkways, sidewalks, driveways. Um, this quote really resonates with me. So 10 to 40% more road salt is applied at a facility location than adjacent roads. And this was part of our Smart About Salt training that I took last year. And I just keep this quote on hand because it is really part of the problem is and also part of the solution. Um, is tackling this like unregulated private and individual use, commercial use as well. Next slide, please. All right, great. So, as part of my community outreach, or part of my work in schools, I take the science that we have learned I've learned from FOTMW, from Friends of the Muskoka Watershed, and our scientists on the board, and I communicate this out. So, from a Muskoka perspective, um, maybe beyond, but chloride impacts lake health in three ways. First, it does interrupt the biological systems in place. It disrupts smaller organisms, zooplankton in particular, and affects aquatic food chains, which in turn affect biodiversity here in our Muskoka watershed. In terms of chemistry, when we're working with our volunteer scientists, and we ourselves also test using chloride sensors, we can see when we're testing, chloride is on the rise and is an upward trend in chloride levels in our waterways. So we know chemistry is being impacted. And then physics. Just like Jerome mentioned at the very beginning of this webinar, that chloride or the increased salinization of our freshwater lakes really impact how lakes work, how they turn over in the spring, and that is definitely something that we need to be concerned about. Next slide, please. Great. So when I'm at events and when I talk to teachers and students and I meet people in the community, we have a discussion about alternatives, and then I do provide them with tools because once they've become aware of this road salt issue, it's automatically a positive. How can I get involved? So as part of our work on this campaign, we've launched the Green Cup movement. And what we do is we have this one green cup, which you can see there in the picture. And I hand these out at events, and people register their cup with me. So once they've learned this material, they know one cup is kind of a way that they can measure road salt. So if they use sodium chloride at home or at work, they can take that cup with them. One green cup is about 12 ounces or 350 mils. Um, and it covers an area, we call it a one car, an average driveway, 46.5 square meters. And that should de-ice it effectively as a guideline. And our other option for smaller spaces is one tablespoon for one sidewalk square. So these are our two key strategies for how people can tools that they can take home, they can quickly put to use. And also, if you don't have a green cup, it's roughly a medium-sized coffee mug works, roughly 12 ounces. Next slide, please. Also part of my communicating is that we launched a survey last year to just kind of get an idea of what does our community know about road salt and how do they use it? How do they apply it? So we put out a question like, how much road salt do you use on your driveway? And we had such a variety of responses from people that did use road salt, that didn't use road salt, but there was a lot of confusion about how much you put out. So, some people said, oh, I do a quarter of a bag for my driveway. Some people said half. Some people said just a little less than half, but not quite quarter. Like we were all over the map. So, the Green Cup is a way for us to kind of help give people those tools to kind of take the mystery out of how much road salt do we need on an average driveway. And then, of course, if you purchase a roughly 10 kilogram bag of road salt, I just did the math, it's 29 green cups. So in my mind, if we can use this as a tool, kind of reflect on application amounts, that would be 29 driveway applications. And that road salt bag should last a lot longer than if you were doing a quarter of a bag per driveway application, which is one of our lowest responses. So I wanted to share that slide with you tonight. Next slide, please. Our salty tips. So I call these when I'm out at events, this is my key piece of information. So in terms of alternatives, we kind of lay out, okay, these are the practical things that you can do, including using the green cup and the tablespoon per sidewalk square. So we always recommend, as this is a collective approach to the road salt pollution problem, we use our tools first. So shovel often, even if it doesn't look like it might not need a shovel. The more you can shovel, the better. Um, use our green cup or a medium coffee mug, and I can talk about how to get green cup later. Um, and if it's -10, like look at your temperature, air temperature. If you have a thermal, oh, I'm forgetting what that top is called right now, but if you can check your pavement temperature, even better. If it is below -10, like -11 and colder, road salt isn't as effective. So you need to move to something that doesn't de-ice, but is a traction piece. So these are my key tips. So sweep up, reuse the salt as much as you can, store it in a tight fitting lid. Wear proper footwear, winter tires. There's some site-specific strategies that work really well, like directing downspouts and watching where the melt path of your stored snow is located, so it doesn't cross over walkways. And then starting a conversation about winter maintenance certification and practice training and use of road salt with your winter maintenance support. So these are my key messages in the public. Next slide, please. Oops. Key alternatives, promoting safe alternatives. We do promote the use of traction option like sand, but we do like to suggest that you also use the green cup for sand. Using sand in measured amounts helps to reduce another switching from one ecological problem to another. Using pickled sand with low percentages of salt, that's just a salt and sand mixture. Pre-wetted salts or brine options. I really promote use of signage and blocking off dangerous spots, like this stairwell in Bracebridge. It's blocked off every winter. Exploring things that are different and unique, like recycled tire mats for really tricky spots. I highly recommend ice cleats, traction height, and traction shoes with really good traction. And if you can stay home, that's ideal on very slick days. Next slide, please. Perfect. This is our end game. We just want to see decreased chloride levels like we all do, but also making our tips and our green cup movement a practice behavior across Muskoka, but also to spread that message to limit our overuse of road salt. Next slide, please. Perfect. In order to make winter maintenance more sustainable and from a Muskoka perspective and using our science, that we've been growing and learning together with other academics, we think that these would be key policies that we could support or encourage. New chloride guidelines that consider soft water ecosystems, which apparently MECP is considering. Limited liability framework, which Danny touched on, mandatory winter maintenance training and certification in road salt best practices for winter maintenance professionals. Some transparent reporting and monitoring of road salt use would be ideal. Having a conversation about mandatory winter tires in Ontario and reducing speed limits during weather events. Next slide, please. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Alicia. With that, we are now well grounded in the current winter maintenance practices, some alternatives and research around them. And so we're going to move into our panel. We're going to start with panel questions that we have prepared, but this is the time, if you've been thinking about questions, to drop them in the chat, because we'll be doing the live Q&A right afterwards. So first, I will pass it over to Danny for our first couple of questions.
Beautiful. Thanks so much. I'm just going to invite my other panelists to make sure that your camera is turned on, because it's the only way that we can add your spotlight also. So Beautiful seat. So grateful for all the rich information that was represented tonight, and thank you to each of you for the unique perspective that you brought. Although we're overrepresented, I guess, with limnologists at this event, but I think we're lucky to to have that kind of overrepresentation. We're running a teeny bit behind on our schedule, so I'm just going to invite the panelists. Just give me a cue if there's a question that you're really passionate about answering, and we'll try to get through as many of these as we can. So the first place that I'd love to start is the elephant in the room that we have had an incredibly snowy winter, which is a beautiful thing, but it has also caused tons of safety issues and lots more need for road and sidewalk clearing. I would love to hear if you have an example from your own life of a kind of like good news story that you saw or heard from winter maintenance this year. I'm gonna start and just give a little shout out to my neighbor at the end of the street who does the most timely snow removal that he doesn't need to put down any sort of like melting agents because he has his shovel on the ground shortly after the snow falls. So there's no need to put down anything. So that's like my example of a one from my life. But are there any other stories bubbling up for you of what good winter maintenance looked like this year? Yeah, Jennifer, go for it.
Yes, I kind of I want to echo what you just said. So we, in my household, we have two small children, and it is sometimes difficult to get out and shovel right after the snow falls. But yeah, it's a priority, so that we don't have to put anything down. We also here, I live in the town of Saugeen Shores, and we have sidewalk plows. So those come around after every snowfall. I mean, most of our snowfalls this winter have been pretty significant, but the sidewalk maintenance is really, really good in the town as well, which prevents the need to put anything down.
That's so wonderful. There's a few jurisdictions that do sidewalk removal, and I wish mine was one of them. Alicia, go for it.
Great. Yeah, I have a few things to share, but I'll just share one. Um, Again, I feel like in the spirit of collective responsibility of trying to reduce our use of road salt, I did want to give a shout out to my neighbor as well. He just has all the tools, and he's up early and he goes to everybody's driveway, within a certain range. And we have a lot of elderly neighbors, and he goes to their driveways first and he makes sure that they're all clear. And I just really appreciate that kind of community responsibility around winter. I think that's really special, and if you can support that in your neighborhood, I really encourage it. So we all give gifts to him at special holidays because he's pretty awesome.
That's so special. Yeah, we've thought about making some sort of like a good neighbors program for winter maintenance that just helps tackle salt pollution at the source, which of course includes our own neighborhoods. I think that's wonderful. Jerome or Shelley, did you want to get in with a story from good winter maintenance this year? Yeah, go for it, Shelley.
Just a quick one, and it's really just anecdotal, but I think that Kingston is plowing more and salting less. And that's, just my observation from walking walking to and from downtown and work. And but it really seems like despite the huge amounts of snow that we had this year, I really wasn't seeing salt on the sidewalks, and but they were still being plowed and were quite walkable. So I totally anecdotal, but I feel like Kingston deserves a shout out for that.
Yeah, I've been seeing a lot of efforts from municipalities to try and curb salt pollution because they're the people also trying to protect their drinking water sources that are impacted by the salt pollution as well. So, a shout out to all the municipalities that are doing what you can under this current kind of policy ecosystem as well. What about, oh, sorry, Jerome, did you want to get in there with an example?
No, I just wanted to say that I think we are hearing about a lot of snow this year, but in areas that are usually not used to have a lot of snow. The GTA got more snow, yes, but that is not the case for everywhere at all. If we look at the basin as a whole, the precipitations are normal. We are starting to see the beginning of the snow melt. The water levels are not particularly high on average compared to the long-term average. So I think it all depends. If you ask about my driveway in Ottawa, we don't have a lot more snow than usually, really. So, and I love exercising because when you're stuck on an office most of your day, shoveling is a good exercise. So, I encourage everyone to practice.
Yeah, somehow we all come out stronger in the winter. All right. Well, what about this space of innovations and technology? There are tons of people who are very hopeful that we can innovate our way out of many of the solution or many of the problems rather facing society today. And I wonder if there are any things that are exciting you or inspiring you that are innovations coming out of the winter management space. Yeah, Alicia, go for it.
Sorry. Yeah, I think this winter, just trying to keep abreast of all the changes and all the news. I feel like road salt was in the news a lot, and it was touched on quite a bit. Maybe I'm just feeling new to this story, but I feel like it was really um, accessible. So I think in terms of technologies, I've heard municipalities using AI to help guide winter maintenance contractors to apply the right amount of salt at the right time, the right place. Those types of kind of initiatives, I would recommend if it means we can use less and we can be timely about it, cost effective, ecologically responsible. And then also the town of Bracebridge installed sensors. That winter maintenance contractors can access in real time from their vehicles. And the sensors provide them with all the details they need, like pavement temperatures, road salt condition, or sorry, ice conditions on the road, so that they can also be more proactive about their use of road salt. So just really great strategies like that I want to highlight and follow, and then hopefully other municipalities can pick up on these options.
Thanks, Alicia. I saw someone in the chat also asked how soon might UV absorbing concrete be commercially available, and I don't have an answer for you about that, but I know that there are several universities and private sector companies working on it, so hopefully sooner rather than later. And who knows, maybe we can get a jurisdiction to trial some of those kinds of solutions in pilot projects as well, just to show their efficacy too. So just wanted to flag that. Other innovations or technologies that are exciting you as it pertains to winter maintenance or curbing salt pollution? Yeah, Jerome, go for it.
I think so. The city of Ottawa has a program to promote the use of permeable surfaces. So when people replace their driveway, to switch to permeable surfaces, which actually has benefits all year long, not just when you have a lot of rain. So I'm not going to name the companies behind that, but it's been something that is, I think, interesting. This new design for driveways that could be used commercially, but also for just homeowners. Really, it's that is maybe part of the tool in the toolbox. We do have such driveway, and I have to say our neighbors are asking if we have a heated driveway, and we don't have a heated driveway. But I can tell you that the water melts immediately when there's a bit of heat, and then it goes through, and we don't need to apply anything. So that is maybe part of the technologies. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that that kind of like knowing that there are so many of these small changes that we can make that could have these big cumulative impacts at scale, just like road salt in small amounts might not be a problem at scale, at the scale that we're using it in Ontario alone, 2 to 3 million tons every winter at minimum. Like we know that they can have big ripple effects from these little changes. So I'm really glad that you brought that in. One of the one's inspiring me too is cities are designing their wastewater infrastructure so that they can capture the passive heat that is generated in like the wastewater and use that to melt roads and sidewalks. And so that's again another like non-additive solution. And things like that I think are design solutions that I'm really interested to see us lean more into. I'm going to shift us away from the technological and innovation space and more into the space of really the heart of what brings us here today, which is the integrity of our watersheds. I think that I hear often a call for a watershed-based approach to tackling salt pollution. Um, I would love to invite reflections on what do you think that that looks like on this issue? Like, what does a watershed-based approach actually mean? And perhaps there's a piece of this too about like whose responsibility is it to be enacting that kind of an approach as well. So I'll invite that reflection on the watershed-based approaches and what it means, but also like who are the people behind that? Jennifer, do you have a idea for that one that you want to get in on? Oh, sorry, I'm just inviting you to unmute there.
Sorry, yeah. Well, I think that there definitely needs to be a whole watershed ecosystem approach to most environmental problems, and we need to have collaboration to really get to the root of things. But I think that there's space to not only collaborate, amongst different levels of government, but also local nonprofits. I think have a place here where they can engage with the residents of different areas, individual landowners, year-round seasonal residents, and help to bring about local considerations. So, whether it's, soft water in Muskoka or karst landscapes on the Bruce Peninsula, increasing knowledge and awareness of the issue, but also how it really impacts citizens in these different scenarios is really, I think, what brings it home.
Hmm. Thanks, Jennifer. Uh, Shelley, did you want to jump in there? You have that
I
that
have
lean
that
in.
look.
Yeah.
Well, I was just thinking, like, I think a watershed approach could be useful even for identifying what the key um, kind of drivers are of salt pollution in each watershed, because it probably is going to vary a lot. And then, who's responsible probably depends on kind of where that salt is coming from. Is it mostly residential driveways, or is it mostly private parking lots, or, the road net, municipal road network? And I think looking within watersheds and identifying kind of the key drivers is probably a key thing, especially, I was thinking about Alicia's presentation, that it was so great in having this multifaceted approach to reducing salt, and I really think that's the way to go. But I think you have to kind of look within each watershed and figure out who you're really targeting with all of those.
Mm. Got to let the details that are present in each watershed actually drive the approach. Yeah, I love that. I think that it's such a thing that we take for granted that all watersheds are created equal and that they all need the same things. But we know from your research, among many others, that that's just not the case, and that we need to take those factors, land use, water use, all those things, the stakeholders on the land, and then the actual aquatic ecosystems themselves really seriously. I appreciate that so much, Shelley. Thanks. Jerome?
Yeah, I think when we think about the Great Lakes are such massive amount of water, and Shelley, I think your results are going to contradict what I'm going to say. But what happened in the Great Lakes is that we found that organisms in general have been able to cope with salt to date, and therefore there hasn't been a need to do much. Although everything that is framed around the management of the Great Lake is to take a watershed lands approach to how we do things. And I think we see a lot more of these acute effects on streams, on rivers, because we do see these spikes of concentrations. And I want to go back to Jack Valentine's thoughts in 1978, where he was saying that really for some of these stressors, we should calculate the cost to society. And that will, in that case, we might come with a very different view on how we want to manage things at a watershed level. And salt is very much on the list for that.
Yeah, there was in Canada a study done in 2017 trying to estimate the impacts of salt on the economy. And the conservative number that they came up with, the kind of least amount of impact per ton of salt was annually costing Canadians $4.7 billion annually. And that's in like the ecosystem concerns are included within that. And I think that that number is jaw-dropping for a lot of people, that the externalities of salt use, it's perceived as this very cheap thing, but in reality, that it is not cheap for us to use in the long run. And in the perspective that water is life, we also need to recognize that there are some things that we can't buy our way out of, and we need to make sure that we're protecting water at the source. Okay, I have one more question for you, which is there a salt alternative myth that you'd like to bust? Shelley, go for it.
that these chemical de-icers are environmentally friendly. That drives me out of my mind because you see them labeled, no harm to the environment. And it's like, that's just not true. So.
Echoing that. Any other salt myths to bust? Yeah, go for it, Alicia.
Sorry, yeah, one thing, yes, I totally agree with Shelley. I do encourage people to read the ingredients on the products that they're buying, and if they see chloride, then they know we're kind of talking about the same thing. So to tread carefully around labeling. The other thing too is beet juice. From after hearing Shelley's research on beet juice, I do communicate that a lot when I'm in the public, because there was all these Facebook ads for a while and we got a lot of questions about it. So we've been kind of keeping those conversations going. And then I just always want to say, like, there isn't really a silver bullet to this issue. So and if there is one that pops up, we really have to evaluate the toxicity carefully before we use it, just like the beet juice scenario. And then I did have a volunteer that came and talked to me about clumping kitty litter, because a lot of people I talk to do use kitty litter as a traction aid. And she just wanted to remind me to also communicate, as long as it's not clumping, because clumping could be dangerous to birds. So that was just something else that came up, and I thought that's an important conversation piece to be having at the community level as people try new things, and we have to be careful about consequences we might not see right away. But if we're putting it out into the environment in larger amounts, we can have kind of unforeseen consequences that we don't want.
Thanks, Alicia. Jerome, Jennifer, any salt myths you'd like to bust?
Well, one that is, I think, the nature of humanity, to think that things are linear and things can continue and increase in a slow fashion. However, there are steps sometimes, and we might be for some of, and salt might be, we don't know yet, but we may have reached the carrying capacity of salt in some ecosystems. And I gave the terrible scenario if we were to lose the stratification of Lake Ontario, the thermal regime. When that happens, there is no coming back here. We're not going to reverse that, say, okay, we're going to reduce our, no, it's not going to be like this. It's going to be a new state. So I want to bust the idea that, it's okay to continue business as usual because, yeah, things are slowly happening, but no, there are cases where things drop.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. It connects to the thing that was on my mind, which is that people think like, oh, like what can let's just take the salt out of the water. And like that kind of a process is so difficult, so resource intensive, so land intensive, so energy intensive. Like there's so many things about it that it just isn't a practical solution, especially at the scales of salt pollution that we're talking about. We really have to stop salt at the source. Um, so, Jennifer, did you want to get in there with a myth to bust before I pass it back over to Monica to get into some audience questions?
Nothing really too much to add. I think my biggest one is again, yeah, just understanding the ecological effects of some of these alternatives really and fully, completely, because yes, they're not, what's labeled as environmentally friendly or what's assumed to be low risk might not be in actuality. And you mentioned in your presentation the concept of problem shifting, and so to really and truly fully understand what these alternatives can be in the environment is crucial.
All right,
And I
and
feel like this is, yeah, it's like historically environmental issues have not always, alternatives to the environmental issues have not turned out to be as benign as they initially maybe have been thought. So yeah.
And hopefully we'll learn our lesson on this one that there are these, like, there's a huge suite of policy and practical alternatives, as well as use of physical alternatives that can be recovered, that can help shift us away from this, like, toxic polluting regime to one that actually works with the season and with the water and with the land. But you know what? I'm gonna put this question just for a rapid fire to everyone. Thumbs up, thumbs medium, thumbs down. Realistically, do you think that we can alternatives our way out of stopping salt pollution? What's your take? Yes, maybe, or no? Alicia, you're a maybe. Yeah, maybe, maybe. I'm the only optimist in the group. That's a classic, but I think that there's a good grounding in like we need to be skeptical about which alternatives matter. So I really appreciate all your perspectives. Let's dive into the audience questions, and I'm going to flip it back over to Monica to steward that portion.
Amazing. So we have a lot of questions that have actually already been answered by either panelists or people who knew the answers. So I'm really appreciative of everyone sort of crowdsourcing those answers. We do have a few that haven't been answered yet. So I'll put this first one to everyone. Someone is, and there's kind of various iterations of this, of people wanting to know, like, what would be a recommended step to become active in their community? Should they be going to find someone at their municipality? What would be the best place to help advocate for either alternatives or just for reducing salt practices? Sure, Alicia.
From a community level, when members of the community talk to me about how they can get involved, personally, I provide them with the tools and the tips, but I really encourage them to have those conversations with people just in their neighborhood. Like go to your coffee shop and tell them this is how you can reduce your road salt use, or look, you've left some road salt out, you can sweep it up and you can put it back in your container. Like just kind of taking those tips and expanding them out into your neighborhood and increasing those conversations really help. Um, just from that basic community level and just to encourage that also site specific things that they can do. So I'm finding there's never really like a one size fits all winter management um, package. It's very site specific. So sometimes it's even just working with a large property owner and just teaching them what are some practical things you can do to kind of reduce your use of road salt would be really impactful, like moving downspouts away from walkways. Again, sweeping up excessive road salt use that might not, it doesn't have to stay out. You don't have to clean it up yearly. You can clean it up, you know, e- every few days or something to sweep it up and reuse it. So trying to keep that like road salt on site. But yeah, just spreading that awareness around your neighborhood and having those conversations, I think is a really important place to start.
And maybe I could jump back in to give the where to continue it. Also, the one of the things that we're hearing, especially in the province of Ontario, is that conservation authorities and municipalities have been trying to address salt pollution for years. They know it's an issue. They know that it's contaminating their drinking water sources. They want to do something about it, but they don't actually have the policy tools that they need in order to tackle it at the source. So there's a big provincial push for action happening through the group that I help facilitate, the Ontario Salt Pollution Coalition. And I'll drop a link in the chat for how you can get involved in that provincial advocacy. But there's a few decision makers at the provincial level. And if you can contact your MPP about it, if you're based in Canada, that's also really, really important because they can represent the issue to the other decision makers. We need all those provincial level people getting involved. So that's my pitch there.
Okay, there are a number of questions about, can I get the reference to this or where did you get this number from? And I will say that we are going to do our best to get from all of the panelists those actual links so that in the handout that we send out at the end, you will have everything in one spot. So it won't get people to try and find them off the side in this call, but we will get those all together for you. And we have a question about salt. I think it was especially mentioned in Jennifer's presentation. And so this person is talking about how they thought that sand would cause an issue with clogging of storm drains is not always the best practical solution. So they just wondered if that was an issue with the Bruce Peninsula or anywhere else that you know. So it could be to anyone, but specifically to Jennifer.
Yes, that is a concern. I'm not too familiar with how much of an issue it is in on the peninsula, but it would be a concern. And the not just the clogging, but also as it washes. I mean, we're right on the shore of Lake Huron, right? So and it's a washing into the lake or other smaller water bodies and rivers in the area would be a concern. Yeah.
Any others who would like to answer that question?
Well, since our next conference is in Winnipeg and I had to go to Winnipeg in February, I realized that they don't use salt at all. And so a large amount of sand. So I would be curious to learn from jurisdictions such as the city of Winnipeg, what are the impacts, what have they done to, because I'm sure it does affect their infrastructure. So yeah, I think learning from others in cases like that is a good start.
Okay, I think the last one that I'll ask is if it sort of seems to people in the chat that there's no one solution. There's no good alternative. And so they're just kind of like, what do we do then if there's not this one-to-one switch? And I know it's been talked about a bit in the presentations, but just I don't want to end the call on maybe a low note where people thought they would tune in and they would find out by the end of the presentation that road salt is bad, but we're going to switch to this one. And just opening it up to everyone of what you think the path forward is now that we know the impacts of road salt. Sure, Shelley.
Okay, I'll just go quick, but I think it's a change in the way we look at winter, and I can't remember
Mhm.
I can't remember who said it. It was one of the panelists um, and I just really wholeheartedly agree with that. That we have these crazy expectations of what we should be able to do. We should be able to drive fast on the highway in the winter. We should be able to, wear shoes in winter rather than good boots with traction. And I think part of it is just a whole adjustment. And, that we should shovel our driveway. We should wear good boots. We should put snow tires on, you know. We should maybe hunker down in a snowstorm rather than thinking that we're going to just have business as usual. And I feel like it's an overall mindset, but it's just a switch in how we look at winter and our expectations.
Jerome?
Yeah, I was going to add for me, it's all hands on deck on this one. Um, we have other we have other chemicals of concerns that we're aware of. We talk a lot more about PFAS, for example, and all. So there are now policies being developed to regulate these chemicals. But for salt, really, it touches everyone because we are using it potentially as individuals, or we are in an environment that is using it heavily. So I am hopeful actually that because it's the entire human food chain here that could do something about it, that we would arrive at a better conditions and better solutions for salt. I would have to add that it took over 100 years now to have done something, because if we look at the numbers, I think the increase is starting in the mid 800 or something like that when we look at the data. So, but I do think that the fact that communities are really highlighting the problem is extremely valuable and will push things to move.
Sure, Alicia, you can finish us off.
Oh, thank you. No, I just working in this new world of road salt pollution. It's so multifaceted. I really feel like the approaches also have to be and are multifaceted. And I think we've been trying to kind of apply road salt as this one kind of solution and to de-icing and keeping us all safe, but it's just not it's not sustainable, and the traditional use of road salt is not sustainable, and we have to move forward with all these policies, these conversations, strategies and tips that will just help us reduce the use. And as we move forward, maybe other avenues will open up, like Danny's suggestion, the like the physical changes, the engineered changes. um and I just yeah, I think our ecosystems are under multiple stresses, and I feel like this is just one stress that we can really get a hold on and make some really smart decisions at a policy level, and then apply our practical tips, and we can make a really big difference.
Amazing. Thank you so much to all of our
Thank you.
amazing panelists for sharing your knowledge with us and your time and just creating this space where we can have these conversations and not feel like we're only hearing the negative news of all these different environmental problems, that there are actually people on the ground working to bring about solutions and bring communities together. So thank you to all of you. And we are going to finish off today with a presentation from Gabby Parent-Dolliner, who is the director at Water Rangers, and she's going to share tangible ways we can all get involved and take action. Gabby is the director of Water Rangers, building internal systems, managing water data, and nurturing community engagement, such as the Lake Erie Rangers program, where she serves as the lead. In addition, Gabby serves on the board of the Great Lakes Beach Association, the binational Lake Erie Volunteer Science Network. Gabby frequently works with the International Joint Commission on projects and initiatives like the Community-Based Science Roundtable and the Health Practitioners Advisory Board, as well as for research for the Beach Sanitary Survey and Environmental Health and Sanitary Survey Report. Finally, Gabby works hard on calculating and sharing the value of participatory science with projects such as the Business Case Toolkit for investment in community-based water monitoring. So I'll pass it to you, Gabby.
Thank you so much. this, I want to applaud everyone again. That was so amazing and fascinating. So I have the job of essentially summarizing everything that went on today, and I think everyone did such an amazing job. And just talking about some ways that you can get involved and do some, and take some actions right now. So we're just going to wrap up in a couple minutes, but I do want to bring us back to what the point of road salt was in the beginning. We are looking to protect our fresh water, but we do have to remember that the whole point of the alternatives and road salt was to protect people, keep them safe in the winter. Next slide, please. So when we're thinking of these alternatives to salt, the alternative can't be no alternative. We can't just do nothing. And we've had this amazing a sort of natural experiment that happened this winter in Berlin. So what happened is some places in the world, like Berlin, have actually implemented, for the sake of water. Actually, in Berlin, it's to protect plant life and tree roots. They've had a no salting ban for in place for a long time, and it's sort of worked because they haven't had these crazy winters. But this winter was just incredibly cold and icy for weeks and weeks and weeks at a time, and there was no salt put down. And there are some very sort of loose laws about snow removal and adding some traction, but it's not enforced. So what happened was the hospitals were full of injuries from falls, and there was in just even over weekends there were like 500 to 700 car accidents because of no alternatives that were real and no salt use. In the last couple of days in the House of Representatives, they have now come to a solution where in very specific times they can use salt, but obviously no salt at all, no alternative that worked, was having huge impacts on people's lives. What was recommended, you could see here, I've highlighted it, was hospitals being so desperate, just being like, walk like penguins. That was the advice they were getting. Put some spikes on your shoes. So when we're summarizing, can we get to, move to the next slide, please? The alternatives. I think I'm just going to go over this briefly because I think it was just so well done by everybody that these are the categories of alternatives that we can look at for salt. So we have the chemical alternatives, physical, practical, and policy. Next slide, please. And Danny did such a great job of explaining this. There's probably, I could see from the audience, you all know what deleterious substances are. So when we're adding something as an alternative, is it doing harm to the environment? Can it be removed? Can it be remediated? And I think everyone made this clear that a lot of the chemical alternatives are not necessarily better. They are also of concern. Physical, we have question marks. Practical is sort of the most promising, but it does need to go hand in hand with policy and sort of public culture. And if we go to the next slide, I've sort of just summarized this in a different way from all the amazing speakers. So we know that there are alternatives and enhancements to chloride with varying levels of field use. So these are being used in different communities in different ways. Some alternatives are really helping with some of the problems that were brought up with salt. So sort of the corrosiveness of salt or the total salt use. But most alternatives, as we saw, can be more expensive and they have some trade-offs. So for example, they don't work at certain temperatures. The required application is difficult. Their effectiveness is not as good as salt can be. And we also heard this, especially the beet juice myth, and some of the alternatives, they are having ecological impacts, sometimes even worse than the chloride. So there's not a single alternative that has been proven to be better. And our best sort of right now is the practical alternatives. But as I just mentioned, and as was, I think everyone articulated really well, it does need the support of policy and the public uptake. So short term, what we want to do is substantial reduction of salt. Long term is to completely phase out salt and some of these other toxic alternatives. But there is good news. Humans are smart. We can come up with better solutions that may not exist now. So I am in the camp of Danny, where I have a thumbs up that we can get there and find a solution that works. So we do need to support research, development, and implementation of sustainable, non-toxic alternatives to salt. Obviously, favor physical, chemical particles that are not toxic to the environment. But as the best bet right now is practical alternatives that either reduce or negate the need for chemical solutions. So snow tires, increased plowing, slower winter speeds. I've already sort of articulated this, that We really need the policies in place that support this, but we have to change our relationship with winter. I think that I live in downtown Toronto. It is a very different experience living here in the winter than in Welland, a smaller town where I grew up, where the responsibility of individuals and households on themselves in the winter is very different than what I see in the city. And I think a number of presenters mentioned this, going out in sneakers with zero traction, having no snow tires in the winter. You can't even rent a car in Toronto without 3 days' notice to get snow tires in a northern country like this. We really have to change the expectations that we have and what we see as our responsibility. Can I get the next slide, please? So, um, reinforce this. I think Alicia, everyone did a great job, but I'm just going to reiterate these kind of things that you can do now to reduce salt and take on some of that responsibility and implement some of those alternatives. So, homeowners is that whole idea of shoveling first, using less salt, sweeping up your leftover salt, but you have to implement some of those practical solutions. It is part of being Canadian and living in a northern place. You have to have winter tires. You need to slow down in the winter, better boots, better shoes for traction, so forth. And business owners, I think this has already been covered really well in the presentations, but really thinking about understanding salts, being smart about salt certified, making sure where, when you have those huge piles of salts, where they're going to be stored, covered away from the vulnerable areas, setting your own reduction targets, and also trying out those practical alternatives that have been discussed here, and which I hope to see more of those to come in the next years. Can I get the next slide, please? Other things that you can do, and I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice a little bit. I have a bit of a cold. The other things that you can do to get involved is actually to help fill the data gaps on chloride. We talked a lot about chloride and some of the data that is out there, but we actually have huge holes in what we know about where the salt is coming from and the impact so far, and where is even being impacted by chloride. So we have this spatial gap. So you could see this is from DataStream, these huge swaths of territories that we just have no idea what's going on chloride wise because they're not monitored. But we have temporal gaps as well. What I mean by that is a lot of the monitoring happens during the warmer months, so May to say September. We're really missing those shoulder seasons and winter for monitoring chloride, and missing those sort of spikes and levels coming in. So we really can use help with community scientists to monitor. And next slide, please. Water Rangers developed a test kit called our winter chloride monitoring test kit. It's being used all over Ontario to essentially be out monitoring chloride conductivity, water temperature year round, including all of the different safety information that you need to be monitoring year round. So you can, I'm going to send the link for that. So if people are interested in getting involved or getting their own test kit to help fill the monitoring gaps, you can do so. And then the last slide. These are some of the resources, and I think I will leave it here that were discussed today. So Water Rangers, just like the folks in Muskoka, we have a Keep It Fresh program where you can go to get information on how steps you can take right now to reduce your salt use and reduce the impact that you're having as an individual or as a business owner. You can get involved with the chloride monitoring, as I mentioned. So come to Water Rangers at the Lake Erie Rangers to see how you can get involved, see what areas are already being monitored and how you can contribute to that data pool so we actually understand the scope of the problem. Friends of Muskoka has an incredible program. We just love them, and they've been such a resource for us. So go visit them as well. Watersheds Canada has an incredible list of resources on their road salt pollution page. Obviously, Watersheds Canada's Salt Pollution Coalition is just an incredible resource. And then Jerome put this information up, IAGLR as well, so you can go visit them. So I will finish there. I know we're a bit over time, so thank you all so much. And again, to our panelists and to Danny, Monica, and Kirsten, it's just been an incredible night. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Gabby, for the impossible task of trying to summarize everything in a few minutes. We are going to put up that poll from the beginning of the night. If you can stick around for a few more minutes with us just to answer those two questions, if you feel more knowledgeable about alternatives to road salt. And then the second question is, how confident do you feel we can work together to address salt pollution? So that would be great if you could answer those two. While you're doing that, I will just say a gigantic thank you to my co-organizers at Water Watchers and Water Rangers and myself from Watersheds Canada, all of our amazing panelists, as well as the funders that made tonight's event possible. As we mentioned, you will get a recording from today's session as well as summary handout. So you get all the key points, the links to papers, different resources, next step. And so once you get those two pieces of information, you can share those as widely as you would like. Please share them with your community, your municipality, your neighbor, your families, anyone that can come together around this issue so that we can all work together to protect our freshwater. And thank you for sticking with us, for tuning in on a Tuesday night. We will end the poll so we can see where people are at. People are feeling generally more knowledgeable or very knowledgeable is the majority, which is great. And then feeling sort of a mix, which is okay. It's a giant issue that we're trying to tackle when it comes to salt pollution and how confident we can be working together. But I think that today's session will show that even though it's complicated, it's not an easy fix, that it is possible if we create spaces like this to be able to talk about the issue, but then also brainstorm and bring our different experiences and knowledges to bring about locally appropriate solutions. So again, thank you everyone so much for tuning in. It was a wonderful evening of so much knowledge sharing, and I'm so grateful again to the teams at Water Watchers and Water Rangers for making today possible.